What's happening, guys and girls? Acrinator here, and welcome to another episode of World of Warcraft Dungeon Overview. Today we'll be looking at a blast from the past by going through the Caverns of Time dungeon, Culling of Stratholme. I'll be going through it with my priest you see here, so with that being said, let's dive straight into it. In the time between the Second and Third Great Wars in the Warcraft timeline, there was a brief period of peace among Azeroth. The human kingdom of Lordaeron was particularly prosperous, with the wise king Tyrannus Manethil II at its helm. He had much to be proud of, a successful defense against the Orcish invasion of the first two wars done and over with, the rebuilding of Stormwind City to the south, and perhaps most of all, his son, Prince Arthas Manethil. By this point, Arthas was a young man, a burgeoning paladin brought up by the training of Uther the Lightbringer. The road was paved with many challenges laid out before the young prince, but he took them all in stride. He was confident of his capabilities, eager to earn the trust of his people, and willing to give everything for his home. Together with Lady Jaina Proudmoore of Kul Tiras, Arthas began investigating the rumors of a plague spreading throughout the eastern reaches of Lordaeron. While initially nothing seemed out of the ordinary, they soon discovered that cultists were spreading the blight through contaminated grain. Those afflicted would die horrible deaths, only to rise again as the undead scourge. Arthas and Jaina failed to prevent the spread of the plagued grain to the major city of Stratholme, and then had to decide on a plan of how to contain the infection as much as possible. The pair met up with Uther at the gates of the city and attempted to ready the troops for what was about to transpire. Backed against a wall and forced to forsake either those within the city or those without, Arthas made an impossible decision. He moved that the city must be purged to prevent any further spread of the plague. Uther and Jaina utterly refused to go along with the prince's plan, though they were unable to come up with any alternative courses of action. Mortified by what had to be done and unable to stomach the task, many left with Uther and Jaina, leaving Arthas mostly alone. The brave few that remained proceeded to storm the doomed city and cleanse its streets of the unfortunate bystanders. At least that's how it's supposed to happen. Like many of the other instances in the Caverns of Time, the Infinite Dragonflight has sent assassins and saboteurs to meddle with reality. It's our job to make sure everything goes according to the history books once again, as long as we can put aside the irony of helping the man who will eventually become the Lich King. As fate would have it, we must save Arthas to kill Arthas. The Culling of Stratholme is a level 75 to 80 dungeon with a level 80 heroic mode located within the Caverns of Time dungeon hub, which is located in the southeastern corner of Tanaris. When making your way down to the main concourse of the hub, the entrance you'll be looking for is actually the first one on your left. The walkway leading up to it should have the Lordaeron flags posted, and the architecture will look similar to Stormwind. To start off this dungeon, just walk forward until you arrive at what appears to be the basement inside an inn. You should spot Chromie standing next to her signature hourglass. If you want to skip the story-based events and get straight into the dungeon itself, talk to her and ask to skip ahead, though I'd personally recommend experiencing this at least once. It's pretty important in regards to the story overall. During the early days of the Scourge's campaign in Lordaeron, the concept of sewing corpses together to create abominations was in its infancy. Meathook was of the first generation of these monsters that took on the form of what we now know and fear today. After going through the whole dialogue with Arthas and whatnot, and once he leads you into the main entrance of the city, you'll be fighting against small waves of Scourge. You'll notice a counter at the top center of your screen keeping track of how many waves you've killed thus far. You'll notice a lot of undead around the area, but most of these won't count as the wave mobs. Those are elite mobs that are walking around in the designated areas of the map. Their location will be marked by a white flag, so just head over to where they are and they should be easy enough to spot out. On the fifth wave, instead of the normal mobs, Meathook will spawn. The biggest thing to worry about here is to not drag too much aggro from the surrounding trash mobs, since it'll be pretty easy to overpull in this situation. What makes it more difficult is that casters should stand back to avoid area-based abilities that the boss casts. Aside from that, Meathook will slowly ramp up his damage over time, so kill him fast to avoid a wipe. Salram was one of the first necromancers to be trained in the dark arts underneath the Cairdaro estate of Scholomance. This was back when Kel'Thuzad was personally lecturing those willing to give everything in exchange for control of the undead. Now, high-ranking among his peers in the Cult of the Damned, Salram has been put in charge of overseeing the entirety of Stratholme, ensuring that their new puppets will be ripe for the picking when the time comes. On the 10th wave, Salram will spawn instead of another pack of mobs. The main thing to worry about here is to kill the trash mobs that the boss will summon constantly, just AoE them down and you should be fine for the most part. Casters will want to keep their distance for this one as well, since Salram will explode his minions occasionally, dealing area-based damage. And something for the healers, there will be a curse placed on a random player that will decrease their health and periodically damage them for a large amount of their remaining health. Just dispel and heal them back up to full to avoid spontaneously losing your party members. Epoch is an assassin sent by the Infinite Dragonflight, who is to personally take out Arthas if the tide of the undead corpses proves insufficient. This is the main reason we've traveled back in time, so if nothing else, we can't make any mistakes for this fight in particular. After finishing off Salram, just head over to the end of the Festival Lane on the eastern portion of your map to find Arthas standing in front of a few citizens. Just talk to Arthas and follow him to get to the next major fight. The only real thing to look out for in the fight itself is a curse that increases the cost of spells and abilities by 100%. Just dispel it and there's nothing to worry about. That is, unless you like just auto-attacking, then carry on. This fight is legendary for being the turning point in what sent Arthas down the path to becoming the Jailer of the Damned. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do to stop the Lich King from rising to power, so we just need to make sure that Mal'Ganis retreats to Northrend as usual. Arthas will ultimately chase him down, claim Frostmourne, and set in motion the events that will lead into the Third Great War. After going through the secret passageway behind the bookcase and making your way back onto the streets, you'll need to talk to Arthas again in order to make your way towards the final boss. You do need to be conscious of his health in this case, because he can die, though you can also heal him, so that shouldn't happen if you're mindful. On a fun little side note, after you make it to the area just in front of the final boss room, you can take a left to potentially get a new mount. You should have noticed that there's a timer in the center of your screen that's been counting down from 25 minutes since you first started the dungeon. If you go all the way to the left before Mal'Ganis, you should find an infinite corruptor. If you kill this mob, there is a 100% chance to drop the reins of the Bronze Drake. After you've added that little gem to your collection, go back and talk to Arthas to finish up this dungeon. As for the fight itself, it's pretty anticlimactic if I'm being honest. The only thing you need to do is face the boss away from the rest of the group to avoid directional based attacks if you're the tank. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this episode, and if you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more like it, maybe even subscribe. Links to my social media and whatnot are in the description below. And as for the comment question, this one is getting real deep, but do you agree with Arthas' decision to purge Stratholme? Uther and Jaina begged Arthas not to do it, but when I think about it, I think he did the best he could given the hand he was given. If he didn't purge the city, it would have become a stronghold of the Scourge much sooner, possibly leading to the fall of Lordaeron way before Arthas returned from Northrend as a Death Knight. This is one of the most consequential moments in Warcraft history, and plenty of people have given their 2 cents on the matter already. Hell, this might not even be the last video I make about this topic. But anyways, that's all the time I've got for today, so until next time, don't die.